Unit 9, Class and Legitimacy. Contents: 9.1 Introduction, 9.2 Capitalism, Class Relations and Development, 9.3 Concept of Legitimacy, 9.4 Why Legitimacy, 9.5 Basis of Legitimacy: Traditional, Legal, Rational and Charismatic, 9.6 Traditional Authority, 9.7 Legal Rational Authority, 9.8 Charismatic Authority, 9.9 Legitimacy and Social Changes, 9.10 Conclusion, 9.11 Further Reading. Learning objectives. After reading this unit, you should be able to locate the various types of legitimacy, outline the basis of legitimacy, describes the fluid basis of legitimacy. 9.1 Introduction. In this unit, we shall be discussing two important concepts of sociology, that is class and legitimacy. In the first part of this unit, we shall be concentrating on the concept of class as elaborated by Karl Marx. In the second part, we shall be dealing with the notions of legitimacy as propagated by Max Weber. Let us begin with the concept of class. Class, in a conventional sense, is a collectivity of a group of people who have some characteristics in common. Several characteristics have identified several characteristics in identifying classes. Several scholars have identified several characteristics in identifying classes. They have also located the position of class in the society in different ways. For Marx, economic position is the prime in locating class position of a group of people in the society. To put it very simply, class to him is a category of people who have a common economic interest against those of other class in the society. These to him are the objective economic conditions for the formulation of classes in the society. To him, however, class is not only an economic category but also a social force to bring about changes in the society. Here he emphasizes on the issues of subjective consciousness as the key factor for the transformation of the economic categories of the class as the change agents to bring about a revolution in the society. Thus, to him, a category of people with a common economic interest vis-a-vis other form class in itself. And when this class in itself is mediated by subjective class consciousness, it emerges to be class for itself. Indeed, it is the revolutionary class who is ready for action and change in the society. It is important that class is not a static social category. Rather, it undergoes process of transformation of the society. In each of the economic stages, every society, class is distinctively placed with the distinctive social and historical roles. We have to understand this in detail, Marxian concept of class relation and change. Class relation and change. In all the stages of economic transformation of society, there have been specific forms of class struggles. Social class, according to Karl Marx, are the main agents of social change. The change is, however, based on class conflict. Thus, to him, the theory of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. Freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guildmaster and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant oppositions to one another. Carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight, a fight that each time ended either in a revolutionary reconstruction of society at large or in the common ruin of the contending classes. Classes, to Marx, are formed based on objective material condition. These are groups of people with a common economic position vis-a-vis those of other class. In essence, this economic interest in conflicting and contradictory to each other's class position. This class relationship get transformed for hostile action against each other with the intermediation of class consciousness. The objective material conditions form the basis for the formation of class in itself, which get transformed in class for itself in the process of transversing of subjective class consciousness. To Karl Marx, though the class relation was very complicated in the earlier epochs of history, in the modern stage of capitalism, this has been simplified in the modern capitalistic society. New classes, however, have emerged with new condition of operations and new form of struggle between the bourgeois, the owner of the production, that is the haves, and the proletariat, that is have-nots. According to Marx, under capitalism, wage laborers are paupers who grow more rapidly than the population with and wealth. The essential condition both for the existence and sway of bourgeois class is the formation and augmentation of capital. The advance of industry, whose involutionary promoter is the bourgeois, bourgeoisie, replaces the isolation of the labor due to completion by their revolutionary combination due to association. The development of modern industry therefore cuts from under its feet the very foundation on which the bourgeoisie produces and appropriate products. What the bourgeoisie therefore produces, above all, it is its grave diggers. It fallen the victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable. 9.2 Capitalism, Class Relationships and Relations and Development. Modern industry has established the world market that has given immense scope of development to commerce, navigation and communication by land. This development again have paved the way for the extension of industries and free trade. The bourgeois class constantly maximizes its profit through the expansion of new market, introduction of new technology, extraction of surplus values, exploitation of proletariat. However, along with these developments, there emerge new forces of contradiction within the capitalist system. Notwithstanding the emergence of new forces of contradiction, the bourgeois were very revolutionary in their outlook and action. According to Marx, the bourgeoisie historically has placed a most revolutionary part. The bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production and thereby the relations of production and with them the old relations of society. Though the exploitation of the world market, the bourgeoisie has given the production and consumption process a cosmopolitan character. The old industries got destroyed. The old national industries got dislodged. Industry in the capitalist system no longer worked only on indigenous raw material, but raw materials drawn from the remotest zones whose products are consumed in every quarter of the globe. In place of old ones satisfied by the productions of the country, we find new ones requiring for their satisfaction the products of distant lands and climes. In place of the old local and national seclusion and self-sufficiency, we have intercourse in every direction, universal interdependence of nations, and as in material and also in intellectual production. The intellectual creations of individual nations become common property. Nations' one-sidedness and narrow-mindedness become more and more impossible, and from the numerous national and local literatures, this arises a world literature. The capitalists, according to Marx, also subjected nature to the force of man and machinery through the application of chemistry to industry and agriculture, steam navigation, railways, electric telegraph, canalization of rivers. All this facilitated the scope of free commodifications of the economy at world scales. There also emerged a free competition accompanied by social and political institutions to adapt to it. The modern capitalistic, however, according to Marx, has inherited and nurtured the need of its destruction in its own womb. In proportion to the growth of the bourgeois, there has emerged the modern working class, the proletariat. These laborers, who must sell themselves piecemeal, are a commodity like every other article or commerce and are consequently exposed to all the vicissitudes of competition, to all the fluctuations of the market. For Marx, the essence of the captor is to maximize profit through commodification of the production process. As long as capitalism is based on private ownership, the means of production, it maximizes profit of the private producers. The profit is again maximized by exchange proceeding from money to money by way of commodity. Gradually, the proceed from many to money way of commodity end up with more money than one had at the outset. To explain the source of profit, Marx talked about the theory of value, wage, and surplus value. To him, the value of any commodity is roughly proportional to the quality of human labor contained in it. The wage capitalist pays to the workers as the compensation for the labor power the worker rent to the capitalistic is equal to the amount of necessary for the existence of workers and their family to produce the merchandise for the capitalist. Under the capitalistic system, workers receive the wage which is less than the actual duration of the work, that is, less than the value of the commodity he or she produces. Here comes the notion of surplus value, which refers to the quality of value produced by the workers beyond the necessary labor time. Under the capitalistic system, the workers do not get the wage for the quality of the value produced beyond the necessary labor time. In return to the wage received by a workman is restricted only to the means of his substantial subsistence and survival. Marx calculated that the price of a commodity and therefore also of labor is equal to its cost of production. In proportion, therefore, as the repulsiveness of work increases, the wage decreases. With the increase in the proportion of the use of machinery and division of labor, the burden of toil of the labor also increases in terms of increase in the working hours and increase in the quantum of work. The proletariat is without property. His relations to his children and wife and has no longer anything in common with the bourgeois family relations. Modern industrial labor, modern subjugations to capital, the same in England as in France, in America and Germany, has stripped him of every trace of national character, law, morality, religion are to him so many bourgeois prejudices behind which lurk in ambush just as many bourgeois interests. Gradually, the number of proletariat also increases to gain more strength and awareness. The lower middle class, the small manufacturer, artisan, peasants also join the army of the proletariat in their fight against the bourgeois. To Marx, all previous historian movements were movements of minorities or in the interest of minorities. The proletarian movement is the self-consciousness, independent movement of the immense majority in the interest of the immense majority. And again, Marx writes, in depicting the most general phase of development of the proletariat, we trace the more and more less wield civil war raging within existing society up to the point where that war breaks out into open revolutions and where the violent overthrow of the bourgeois lays the foundation for the sway of the proletariat. 9.3 The concept of legitimacy. Legitimacy refers to lawful and regular activity which could be justified on one or the other reasonable ground. For example, the use of public money for some legitimate purpose, legitimate reasons for one's absence from office or work, or being born of person legitimately related or married are such cases that give us some initial ideas about the use of this term legitimacy. In our daily life experience, we come across several such cases when we accept the actions of others as correct, acceptable, and justified. We normally do not question such actions or others, but sometimes we come across such instances when we think the action of the others are not justifiable. When we begin to question the action of others, we get some vague idea of the term legitimacy. What right one has to speak to us like this? Who is he who to order us to do certain things? These are the questions that arise in our minds when we are not ready to accept others' actions, judgments, or orders as such. It could be understood like that: what is the legitimate ground on which one is asking us to do certain favors? This question is related to the action of others, but sometimes questions are raised about one's status as well. A reference to the questions like this has already been made. People born out of the legitimate relationship like marriage are known as legitimate children. In this way, the notion of legitimacy covers much wider than the with which we are normally concerned. Why legitimacy? 9.4 Why legitimacy? Throughout the world in modern times as well as in history, the people and government in power have attempted normally to justify their occupation of power over the people over whom they have ruled. The people in power must be in a position to demonstrate that their occupation of power is legitimate as well. For example, in democratic countries, the people who govern are elected on a regular basis. In such countries, elections are held after a certain period of time and only the elected representative can govern over the people. The people in power have always attempted to show somehow justify their hold on certain privileged position which includes rewards as well as they have been able to develop certain mechanisms through which they are able to justify their claims over their subordinates and the people in general. On the other hand, these subordinates also require some basis on which to accept the claims of their superiors. In this way, legitimacy could resolve the possibility of conflicts between those who govern and those who are being governed. Legitimacy thus resolves the conflict between differing claims of people, as it is important especially in those cases that are related to the distribution of power in society. As related earlier, as stated earlier, the scope of the issues centered around legitimacy is much wider than it apparently appears. A meaningful and scientific analysis of some of these issues is discussed in the sociological discourse. 9.5 Basis of legitimacy: traditional, legal, rational, and charismatic. The credit must go in favor of Max Weber, a prominent sociologist from Germany who not only identified the importance of the issues like legitimacy but also attempted to make a scientific analysis of it. After establishing legitimacy as an important issue for sociological analysis, Max Weber attempted to clarify the important basis of legitimacy. Max Weber identified three main bases of legitimacy, namely what he called it: traditional, legal, rational, and charismatic. Max Weber also distinguished between power and authority. According to Max Weber, power refers to the capacity of the actor to carry out his will in spite of resistance. According to him, legitimate power is called authority. 9.6 Traditional authority. One could derive legitimacy on the basis of traditional grounds. Not very long back in history, several kings throughout the world ruled over the people on the basis of traditional authority. If the authority was derived on the traditional basis, as in the case of kings, then it was not generally questioned by the people. Several traditional legends and epics also supported the rule of the king, as he was considered to be the representative of God. The basic interest behind the rule of the king was like this: the king has been ordered by God to look after the welfare of its people. Box number 9.0 Ascribed status. Apart from the king, several village chiefs in India also enjoyed this traditional authority. In India, traditional village panchayat as well as caste panchayats have displayed ample scope for traditional authority to flourish. Similarly, there have been numerous cases of the tribal chiefs in several pockets of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. All such examples addresses to one central question: why the rulers in earlier societies were able to rule over people without much problems and resistance from them. The answer is that these rulers used a traditional basis of legitimacy to derive power and were able to morally justify their actions in the name of the welfare of the subordinate and disadvantaged categories of people. Traditional authority is also associated with the ascribed status of most of its people in society, who actually appointed one to occupy such privileged position. On what basis one issues certain orders that are to be followed by the most of the people? These type of questions are generally avoided by the people, and a major source of such a form of revolutions of conflict generally happens to the prevalent traditional authority. Thus, if the power structure derives its legitimacy on traditional grounds, it is understood as a case of traditional automacy, a traditional authority. 9.7 Legal rational authority. According to Max Weber, the second base of legitimacy is legal rational. This type of authority has been found in almost all modern societies of the world. It is also known as legal rational authority. The most appropriate expression of such legal rational authority could be what is known as days known as bureaucracy. Max Weber himself had identified bureaucracy as an important and emerging phenomena throughout the world and himself made a conceptual analysis of it. Although some of other scholars from other social sciences as well later tried to understand the notion of bureaucracy in the changing scenario of the world. But due to the intellectual craftsmanship of Max Weber, his formulations of bureaucracy still enjoy commendable respect. In fact, Max Weber's discussions involves much more than what is generally attributed to his formulation of bureaucracy. For example, Max Weber's formulation on bureaucracy includes what he called it ideal type, modern organization, and his overall methodology of social sciences. The basic idea here has been to understand how does a bureaucracy get legitimacy in modern organization on the grounds of legal rational authority. Before proceeding further, it seems necessary to clarify some options regarding bureaucracy. Box number 9.2, Ideal Type Bureaucracy. The notion of bureaucracy has been hailed as well as condemned by various scholars, academicians, and political strategists. The discourse on bureaucracy also go beyond the academic discussion, and several times its role has been questioned on political and moral grounds. On the basis of his understanding, particularly in USA, Max Weber constructed an ideal type of bureaucracy which included 11 characteristics attached to it. A clarification seems necessary at this stage, although Max Weber's notion of ideal type is not being discussed here as such, but certain points about it must be kept in mind since he discussed about ideal type of bureaucracy. First, it must be kept in mind that ideal type has nothing to do with the ideal condition that are supposed to be achieved by the individual or organization. Second, it was suggested by Max Weber that all the characteristics as they are stated to comprise bureaucracy are not to be found in any actually existing bureaucratic organization. Third, the opposite of ideal type is real type, which might actually be found in society. But as an ideal type received importance in the sociological literature, its counterpart real type neither received importance nor it was under such in the discipline at large later stages of research. But then what was the need to construct the ideal type? Max Weber believed that ideal type is useful and could be constructed whenever we are dealing with unknown or less familiar situations. Reflections and Action 9.1. What is the difference between charismatic and rational legal authority? Note down your answers in your notebook. Max Weber has clarified the notion of legal rational basis of legitimacy in detail. The legal rational basis of legitimacy is realized through bureaucracy in modern organization. At this stage, the readers are advised to keep in mind, compare the contrast this type of legitimacy with its other types. The main characteristic of bureaucracy could be discussed in the following way. In any bureaucratic organization, there are written rules which are followed by everyone from top to bottom in a defined way. The work and the order related to it are given from there who are at the top of the organization and are to be followed by those at the lower level. Bureaucracy involves a lot of work on paper, which means that no verbal orders could be given. Similarly, only such orders could be given which are appropriate according to rules, meaning thereby that wrong orders could neither be given nor they are to be followed. The work and orders of paper reduce the chances of personal bias against each other. The idea behind such an organization and style of work is that if the issues are correct and corresponding to the existing states of laws, then they should be completed. The aim of the perfect bureaucratic organization include the cases and not the people. Second, bureaucratic organization do their work on paper, it is done by its permanent employees. Rules of the office regulate recruitment of the staff and its promotions. The nature of working and such as organization happens to be different from the individuals who comprise it. The idea behind such an organization has been to ensure complete non-interference from any quarter, completely transparent and impersonal working. Number 3, according to, although Weber's work was concentrated with the public bureaucracy, his emphasis on rationality associated with it is extended the use of this concept in the private sectors as well. Since Weber believed in rational basis legitimacy for both the bureaucracy as well as the then emerging enterprises, it was to be hoped that bureaucracy might finally find a place in the private business organization as well. For there seems to be a need to understand and examine this legal rational form of legitimacy and it expressed through bureaucracy in practice. However, certain characteristics which are contrary to the formulation of Max Weber were noted by some scholars. For example, the issues like misgovernance, incompetence, unnecessary paperwork, and frustration of people in bureaucracy have been referred by several scholars. These dysfunctions of bureaucracy have been referred in the case of capitalistic as well as socialistic type of governance systems. But the credit of highlighting the legal rational form of legitimacy and its analysis goes to Max Weber. 9.8 Charismatic Authority. Max Weber has defined it as the third basis of legitimacy. These grounds of acquiring legitimacy are quite different from the various bases. Charismatic authority is based neither on traditional nor a legal rational basis. It is unique. It is quite different from the two previously discussed bases of legitimacy. Charisma refers to certain qualities in a person which provide him something like a spiritual grace or capacity to inspire others and fill in enthusiasm among the people. These are certain qualities that are not found in every type of personality systems. They appear rarely among the people. Those who possess these qualities are generally able to garner support without much difficulty. They are able to lead the people on the basis of these rare quality is located within their personality system and also due to their unique approach to tackle the problems of society. In this sense, each charismatic leader has got not only a unique personality systems to convince people, but also an approach that looks different from other previous approaches to solve the problems of society. If we attempt to analyze the relationship between a charismatic leader and his followers, then we really that this sort of relationship itself is quite different from others. Box 9.3 Personal Traits and Qualities. As a charismatic leader thinks and delivers, his followers simply work deliberately according to the whims and wishes of their leader. On this basis, the leader derives legitimacy for his words and actions as a person simply follow him without questioning him. We can understand it in other words as well. The personal traits and quality of charismatic leader happen to be such that in a majority of cases they are capable of enough to overpower the other, particularly those who are in his followers. It is like if the charismatic leader proposes something, his followers are likely to second it immediately without asking for much. The followers of the charismatic leader, in fact, keep him in high esteem and his personal qualities influence the followers in such a way that they generally agree to do anything for him. It reflects an unending, enduring, and permanent sort of faith of the followers in their leader. The charismatic leader, on its part, also seems capable of solving any problem, at least his followers believe it. The followers believe in the charismatic leader and doesn't generally attempt to distinguish between what is right and wrong about his approach. The charismatic leader is actually able to inspire others who in turn develop a sort of faith in him which to a great extent is like a permanent one. Weber has expressed the optimistic point of view about the charismatic sort of leadership. Accordingly, charisma has been considered as a force which could change or question bureaucratic rigidity. For example, in the context of modern society, a charismatic leadership might critically examine the whole bureaucracy on particular issue like the child labor or human rights. Charismatic leadership presumes a set of beliefs system which keep itself in the relationship between the leaders and his followers. Reflection and action 9.2 outline the notion of charisma. How does charisma get reutilized? Write down your answer in a notebook. Max Weber was of the opinion that it is possible for a leader to show his charisma once, but it is not enough since the expectations of the followers gain new heights. The leadership in question get compelled to show its charisma once again. In fact, the followers expect their leaders to show his charisma more than once. Once is not enough sort of situation generally engulfs the leader. This higher expectation of the followers compel the leaders to think again and again and to work out for something new which could be considered as functional equivalent to his own charisma shown earlier. And since his personality system has certain unique attributes, sometimes he become able to show his charisma again. Max Weber has identified process this routinization of charisma. Without it, one fails to remain and occupy the status of charismatic leader. T.K. Uman has studied one such case of leadership in the context of Indian history. According to him, the role of Vinoba Bhave in the Bhutan movement could be identified as that of a charismatic leader. It was found in the study of that charismatic leader of Vinoba Bhave resulted in favor of the stability of the system but change in the approach, especially when a certain powerful people donated their land willingly in favor of the poor people. Thus, charismatic authority refers to the unique sort of basis of legitimacy which is different from earlier discussed traditional and legal relationship based of legitimacy. Legal rational basis of legitimacy. 9.9 Legitimacy and social changes. Although Max Weber referred to three bases of legitimacy, but society has undergone several changes since then. Max Weber charismatic of legitimacy into three types of resembles with his others conceptualization, as well as in a sense they could be considered as ideal or pure types. Max Weber's formulation, although include important basis of legitimacy, but his list of such bases might not be an exhaustive one. For example, in a modern society, another important base for legitimacy has been identified, which is related to professional authority. There are people like doctors, engineers, chartered accountant, computer personnel, and lawyers, and who specialize in other jobs and undergone rigorous training and studies of longer years to learn about their jobs. As a result, it is these professionals have a stray of their mind, their own, and they are free to take decisions in their specialized and areas, and for such an action they are quite competent to do so. Thus, the power acquired in such a way is known as professional authority, and it derives legitimacy on the basis of specialization achieved after a long period of training. One example might be given here. It is the doctor who is capable to derive the type of treatment to give him to the patients. Such a decision can't be taken by the people having traditional, legal, rational, or charismatic authority. Now, days societies of the world are changing at a much faster pace than before. This period of change is also referred to as the period of transformation of societies. During this process of change, sometimes it becomes difficult for the people to understand various claims of legitimacy. At times, we come across conflicting claims about legitimacy. For example, who must be the appropriate person to decide about the marriage of a joy in Indian society happens to be one such important question. If the parents takes the decision about the marriage, then it is the case of traditional authority, and if the boy himself takes the decision and decide to marry in the court of law, then it is case of legal rational authority. A married couple could derive legitimacy of their relationship to each other either on traditional or legal rational basis. In the imperial situation, sometimes we came across conflicting claims based upon different grounds of legitimacy. For example, regarding the decision of marriage, conflicting claims might be seen between traditional and legal rational basis of legitimacy. In the rapidly changing society, sometimes it becomes difficult to really identify the real basis of legitimacy. The rapid changes that are taking place in the societies of the world have created such conditions where sometimes it becomes difficult to decide the grounds or basis of legitimacy. In the classical sociological literature itself, we come across discussions where societies could not really enjoy the fruits of development of societies. Along with it have been brought some undesirable condition as well. For example, Emily Durkheim has referred to pathological conditions of society. Karl Marx has taken out talked about alienation in the capital society. These conditions provide the ground for the critics of legitimacy. Under such conditions, sometimes one shall fail to decide on how to decide the legitimate grounds for actions. In modern societies, particularly in the case of USA, you see, right, males prefer to be to the prevailing uneasiness and indifference in society, which has emerged as a result of the threat on the existing values, which itself are eroding fast. In simple words, whenever we come across some assertions like "Who are you?" and who to say, or "Who is he to issue orders?" like that, we could see the beginning of on the emerging crisis of legitimacy. Whenever the older and the known bases of legitimacy were questioned and new bases had not been emerged, it could be identified as the situation referring to critical legitimacy. This crisis of legitimacy has been seen particularly in case of several in Western countries, but some developing countries of the world might also see such conditions as emerging. Although the older grounds of legitimacy have been challenged in modern society, but this resulted crisis of legitimacy could well be managed on the newer grounds of legitimacy. But one trend which could be seen as emerging throughout the world at the moment is that the area of legal rational basis of legitimacy is increasing every day. Conclusion. 9 and conclusion. The notion of legitimacy has got much wider application than it appears for its conceptual urges. In the changing era and in the new world order, the notion of legitimacy has acquired new meanings and wider applications. Some countries of the world have democratically elected the governments and they derive their legitimacy on the ground of their being elected by the people. Non-elected governments might face some problems at home and abroad if might become increasingly difficult to them to derive the sort of legitimacy required to rule over the people. On the other hand, people who wage on an armed struggle, verge of an armed struggle against the state and terrorist groups do not enjoy the legitimacy even though they claims like fighting for the cause of the people. In recent times, all the terrorist groups throughout the world have lost public support or sympathizers, and the public opinion has been built against their violent actions. In the modern political analysis, the significant question that has come up in concerns with the issues related to the elections. Elections have acquired a new meaning and new dimensions in modern society. The issues like terrorism and organized violence are losing grounds in the modern polity. People are general and intellectuals in particular having been asking the questions like why these terrorist organizations can't contest election. In this way, elections and elected governments have acquired the sort of legitimacy of which even the thought or idea was not possible just a century ago. Some international organizations like the Commonwealth of Nations accept the participation of only democratically elected government as its legitimate member state. The war against terrorism has acquired international dimension. In modern political analysis, thus the issues concerning legitimacy has been acquired a new scope, meaning and dimension. Similarly, the international agreement on human rights and the establishment of various national human rights commissions in different states have given a new meaning to the quality of life. It sounds like that these human rights should become the legitimate possession of the people, and any violation against it, whether it is by any individual group or even state, could be judged as a crime which is an illegitimate action. Such issues provide us an opportunity to understand the changing dimensions of the issues concerning legitimacy. 9.11 further reading. There is 2 books as given: Protestant Ethic and Spiritual Capitalism by Max Weber. Another one also by Max Weber only, Economy and Society. 3 volumes are there. So this is the end of Unit 9.